What is going on, guys? Today we're going to be doing a axle brake and sprocket video. We've been getting a ton of questions, guys, about this subject, so Ben's going to be going over everything you need to know, how we make the axles, how to put together the entire assembly, how to hook up your brake rotors, all that kind of stuff. So sit back, relax, and get a notebook out because it's going to be a good video.
So everybody keeps asking where we get our axles. They're custom made by us. Get them in, cut them down. We machine the ends, drill and tap that for a 3/8 thread that captures your hub on the end. So we're gonna go over that. We're gonna go over the rear axle setup. Some guys were having some questions. What we run. Gonna go over the brake setup, sprocket. It's pretty simple stuff. I'll show you guys how we do it. So we're gonna get this axle cut down. We're gonna cut it down to 26 inches is what we use here. I'm gonna cut the ends off with the cold saw. We're gonna take it over to the lathe. Gonna face, drill and tap for the thread. So the first step in making these axles is cutting these to length before we machine them, just to knock them down. These come in 40 wide. We also face a little off too, so they're about approximately 26 inches. These are zinc coated 2 keyways, 180 degrees out. It's made of a little bit harder of a compound material. You're giving a helping hand?
Oh, giving you a helping hand. Really, really having a good
really
Wednesday.
On me there. Gonna take this down to the lathe, get that set up for that drill and tap, center drill. Well, you know, you gotta go back here and turn on your rotary phase converter. Shout out to those guys. Just finished up this axle. It's all machined. Got a chamfer on it. Got it drilled and tapped. We're gonna get the brake hub, rotor, sprocket hub, and sprocket set up and show you guys how we put that on the axle.
What are you doing now, Ben?
Just tighten this sprocket up on this hub. Crisscross pattern, man.
Wow. Oh, gentlemen. Shows you.
Sprocket hub, pretty much the way we do it. Got machine side, cast side, put the bolts, nuts on the back. This is threaded. These are all Loctited.
Loctited?
Loctited.
Is that a word?
It's a word, look it up.
Loctited.
Probably not.
Alright, well you...
The bolts have, what do you want me to say? They have Loctite on them. You know how many more frames I could build if I just say Loctited instead of say they have Loctite on them every
Give
time?
me a round number how many more frames you could build.
Probably at least like one in like 78 years.
Wow.
Okay, back to what we're talking about here. Brake, we got a rotor, got a hub. So the way we put it on our bikes, have it so that bolts go through, nuts on that side, the opposite side that the pinch bolt is on. So whenever we put this on, it's gonna go on just like this. We'll show you that here whenever we get it actually assembled on the axle. Got one more of these to do, a giveaway build.
Nice.
Next up here, gonna get these shaft collars out. What I do is I'll get these and I'll replace all the screws because these are just black oxide. They'll end up rusting. So we'll take these out, replace them with stainless. That'll keep it from rusting, keep everything. This axle is also zinc plated, won't rust. I'm digging this new side-by-side build, man.
You gotta find a different word than that.
Side-by-side, double. Doing double the work. Not a real wordsmith, man. We're getting ready to put this back axle in. So what we're gonna need, we use a total of 8 shaft collars. So we're gonna put 4 on the inside. I'll show you guys how. So start feeding your axle through. We're gonna put a shaft collar on. We're gonna put the sprocket on. Nuts going to the left. We're gonna put another shaft collar on. I make sure they're all facing the same way. Another shaft collar. The reason for doing this is these hubs just clamp down. There's been issues where if you don't put these shaft collars on there, that key stock that's inside could slip out. So what we're doing is we're capturing this on each side so that key stock can't move. And it also gives you kind of a secondary clamping power so that this doesn't move too. Next will be the hub. And then also another shaft collar. Pretty much just sandwiching that in place. The clamp, the pinch bolt on the hub should keep it in place as it is, but what we're doing now is we're putting a clamp on each side. So that's just helping keep that in place and also making that key stock so it can't fall out. What we'll do now is we'll get everything lined up, and then we'll put the key stock in last. We'll get the axle centered, and then we'll start getting these, the brake hub and the sprocket hub lined up. So what I'll do is I'll put the axle through, I'll measure to make sure that we're the same on each side. These bolts for the bearings are kind of snug, but still a little bit loose so that the bearings can move. And what we'll do is we'll measure each side and just make sure it's even. Then we'll tighten down these set screws. And then also we're gonna use another 4 shaft collars. Once we get that lined up, we're gonna put another kind of redundant again. You have the set screws that would hold the axle. But what I like to do is I put one on this side, and I'll put one on the other side. What that'll do is now that captures that on both ends. So now this axle can't move back and forth if these set screws were to come loose. Probably overkill, but I mean, this is the best way that you could build it to be the most reliable. We'll get the hubs on. We'll do the same thing. Shaft collars on the back side. That way the key stock can't come out the back. And then whenever we bolt our washers on the front, that's going to completely capture that. So now that hub can't slide either way if it were to come loose. So it's just kind of, it's literally the best way that you could go about this so that you have multiple backups in case something were to come loose. And obviously on all this stuff, all gets Loctite, so.
Loctited.
Loctited, pretty much it. I'll bring you guys back whenever I'm gonna put that brake rotor on. There's been a couple questions on that. The sprocket, it's pretty self-explanatory. Line up with your torque converter. You're gonna get your engine straight, make sure everything's aligned. The last thing that you're gonna wanna do, you'll get your chain on, and then setting this left to right will be the last thing that you do so that it spins free and doesn't bind and make any clicking or anything. Definitely takes a lot of time to get this all dialed in perfect, but man, once you get it just right, it's just so smooth. So now that I got the axle in here, we're able to tighten down these bearings. I measured each side, centered this up, and then what I did was I locked one side down on the shaft. What that'll do is you leave the other side free, and then if these bearings move in at all, they're not fighting themselves whenever you have both set screws on. If this is off a little bit, it'll just slide a tiny bit in this other side, and then you can tighten it up after you get it all tight. Little pro tip. What we're gonna do next is we Loctite everything here. So another little tip, put the couple drops of Loctite down in the hole, and what that's gonna do is whenever you put the set screw back in, if you were just to put it on the set screw, you could like freaking push out. Now you can see you got Loctite coming out the top and bottom. So it's definitely locked in. You're gonna have a wedge that's gonna hold the pads apart. It's gonna hold the cylinder in place. Pull that out. You're also gonna have a wedge on the back side of the master cylinder. Pull that out. We're gonna get this prepped and ready to get on the bike. First thing we're gonna do is we have to loosen this banjo bolt, and we have to tweak this hose and move it closer to this bleeder nipple. So what I like to do is take an 8mm socket, put it on there. That way we can still have access to our bleeder whenever we move this hose closer to the center of the caliper. Another thing that I've found is if you don't loosen this very much, you just crack it, you won't induce any air and you won't have to bleed it afterwards. If you loosen it too much, you could just bleed it while it's on the bike. It's no big deal. So what we'll do is take that where it's close to the bleeder as possible, and we're just gonna hold this while we tighten it up. We might have to tighten it the rest of the way. I always double check it when it's actually mounted on the frame. It's kind of hard to hold right now. So I'll get it as tight as I can now, and then I'll retighten it, just double check it while it's on the bike. But putting this on there first makes it so that you can't run the hose into the bleeder and then not be able to get your socket on. Another pro tip. There's a lot of solid information in here. So what I do now is I'll put this master cylinder on here just so that it's not flopping around whenever I'm trying to get this caliper on. And then we will run this line down through here. So the way that this caliper is going to go on is like this. So the piston side here with the hose and the bleeder is going to be towards the right side of the bike if you're looking at it from the rear. What we'll do is I'll just sit it on there, lock washer, M8, 75mm bolt, stick the bolt through, and then what we'll do is we'll put a washer on each side of this spacer. So you want your brake rotor and everything loose while you're doing this. We'll adjust that after we get this set. I got the top one in, we're gonna put the bottom one in, keep everything loose. Now we got those spacers, the washers, and everything in. We're gonna tighten these up. Make sure that nothing's rubbing, nothing's hitting. Make sure that the bolt's not hitting the rotor. Snug these up. Look at that. You kidding me?
How free does that spin?
It's free as America is. Okay, so next thing what we're gonna do now that the caliper is all mounted up, like I said before, we wanna go back and we wanna make sure this banjo bolt is tight. We weren't able to tighten it like as tight as I would like it before on the bench because you don't have anything mounted to it. Put that 8mm right on there, make sure that doesn't move. And then this here, you're gonna wanna get it tight, but don't go crazy because you can snap this thing.
That's Teddy Westside.
Yeah, it's already pretty tight. So now, putting our piece of key stock into the hub, fit right in. And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna get our shaft collars spun the correct way so they all line up because OCD.
Now what's that key stock do for the people, Ben?
What that does is that locks the shaft. It's a mechanical connection, I guess you would say, to the hub and the shaft. So it pretty much keeps the hub so it can't spin on that shaft. Game changer. I'd say everything's game changer. Pro tip, get yourself one of these for putting these shaft collars. It's a Allen wrench that goes on a socket.
Wow.
I've had the ones that have the ball on the end, no good.
Really?
They end up stripping out. A little more blue Loctite. Here is a through hole, so it's okay if we put it on the threads. So the magical part of all this, whenever you get all this stuff set, hit that brake, it just locks right up. So now with the rotors in there, I'm gonna take this for a little test drive here. Ooh, that's crisp. By moving that, you'll pump it a couple times, make sure it's centered up, make sure it still spins good. And then once you've done that, you just want to make sure, actuate the brakes a couple times, get the pads moving, spin it, make sure everything's lined up, make sure you have no binding. We're going to Loctite this stuff down, tighten it. If you had to, if your brake felt a little bit spongy or soft, you could always bleed it. So far, as of now, we haven't had to bleed any of them. They already come pre-bled. So that's pretty much going to wrap up this course on brakes, axles, and sprockets. So
download your certificate down below.
Yeah. Happy riding.